guys, it's Kayla.
And Jim.
Welcome back to another rainy Meteorology Monday. So we are back with another video. If you happen to hear some rain in the background, it's just setting the mood, okay? There's one storm currently in North Carolina, and it happens to be outside right as we sit down to film. You know, adding to the weather ambiance.
There you go.
What are we talking about today?
So we are going to start a mini-series on hurricane preparedness. Hurricane season started in the Atlantic back on June 1st. It started May 15th for the Eastern Pacific. We just decided, you know what, let's go ahead and do something based on hurricane preparedness. We've already had, I think, 1 or 2 systems form already. Fortunately, we're in a quiet period as of this recording, so we figured let's go ahead and get into this now. What we're going to do is we're going to use NOAA's hurricane preparedness documentation as a guide for these series of videos, and we thought it would be a good topic of conversation.
Yes, and excellent timing as well.
So things we'll talk about is not only for the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific, but applies to many places around the world as well. And we're going to focus on 2 specific things, basically breaking it down to water and wind. And we'll get into those 2 things and other things as well, but before we get started.
If you are enjoying this video and finding it helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below so that it finds other people who might find this video useful, and you get notified every time we post a new video. Let's begin. So first thing to note is that tropical systems don't affect just the immediate coastline. They can affect hundreds of miles inland, both the wind and water aspects, especially if a tropical system is coming up and it does not curve back out towards the ocean and it decides to go up. Maybe it hits like the Florida Panhandle and then it goes through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. I know we've had experience with tropical storm or tropical depression Michael, coming up, so the wind and water impacts are still hundreds of miles inland, not just the immediate coast. So what are some main points to address and some main questions to ask when talking about tropical systems that may impact your area?
The main things are considering the threats. Do I live in a flood-prone area? Do I live in an evacuation zone? What are the structural risks to my home?
Let's dive into that first one, considering the threats.
Although hurricanes can pose the greatest threat to life and property, weaker storms, those below hurricane force winds, can also be devastating. Some of the primary hazards from tropical cyclones include storm surge flooding, inland flooding from heavy rain, destructive winds, tornadoes, high surf, and rip currents. So here are some descriptions of the primary hazards that NOAA uses.
Now moving on to the second point and our first question, do I live in a flood-prone zone?
When discussing hurricanes and flood-prone areas in the same sentence, many people think the flooding is occurring because of the storm surge, but that is only partly true. Tropical systems bring with them copious amounts of rain, and depending on how fast or slow the storm is moving, will dictate how long the heavy rains will continue to fall over a given area. This can lead to inland flooding. So for those of you that live in a flood-prone area, you know exactly what we're talking about. So anytime there's heavy rain for a prolonged period of time, and maybe even shorter periods of time, depending on your flood zone, you know the impacts that a lot of rain can bring in a prolonged period of time. This is very important that it's not only storm surge flooding, but also inland flooding from all that heavy rain too. Could be hundreds of miles inland.
Yeah, and areas that may not typically experience flooding like this still have to be aware for that storm that I was talking about earlier, Tropical Depression Michael it was, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it ended up lots of rain and the ground got really wet and then the trees started falling and we had one fall on our house. So even if you're not in an area that usually gets a ton of inland flooding, be careful when systems come your way.
That's right, and as Kayla just mentioned, not only does the heavy rain loosen the soil, but with the winds on top of that, it can blow down trees and everything else. So lots to consider when it comes to these tropical systems. So if you live in a flood zone, NOAA has provided us a couple of links, which we will link down below as well for you to take a look at.
Question number 2, bullet point number 3. Do I live in an evacuation zone?
Evacuation zones are determined by your local emergency management office and other government agencies to help identify areas most impacted by high winds and flooding. If you are told to evacuate, you need to already have a plan in place, what items to take, and where to go. Now, this topic, we'll discuss this a little bit more in detail in future videos, but yes, definitely having an evacuation plan, especially if you're in an evacuation zone, it's extremely important. Because once they say you gotta go, and you gotta know, where am I going, what do I need to bring, and how do I secure my home. So we'll get into that in later videos.
And our final question is, what are the structural risks to my home?
Identifying any weaknesses in your home is key, especially if you choose to ride it out at home. There are many factors to consider when it comes to evacuating or staying put. So again, with this bullet point, we'll discuss this further in later videos because there's more to dive into here. But some key areas in the home to consider when it comes to hurricanes or tropical cyclones that are going to impact your area are exterior doors, garage doors, windows, mobile homes, basements, and crawl spaces.
So pretty much anywhere that water can get into the house. Any windows, doors, garage doors, everything like that. There are a couple other things like being aware if you have tall trees near your house, like we experienced, should have cut those down. Live and learn. Now they're down, so.
Yeah, they're down.
They're down now.
Not because we got them down, but Michael helped us out.
Thanks, Mike. So there you have it, Hurricane Preparedness. This is our first video in this kind of category. And like we discussed, we're going to be doing a couple more videos on this, diving into some of the topics that we touched on here, as well as some further topics, so stay tuned for that. Again, if you like what you saw, be sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe down below. Down there in the description box, you will find all the links to the NOAA things that we have talked about today, as well as our website and our School of Weather if you're interested in learning more about the basics of meteorology or getting into some severe weather things. There might be a video about hurricanes in there. Check out our School of Weather. Also linked down there is our social media links if you want to follow us over on our weather adventures, Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, I'm Kayla.
And I'm Jim.
Thanks for watching.
And we'll see you at the next Meteorology Monday.
The chair was a lot lower than I thought it was. No, it fell on the floor.
We're using that at the end.